Hello, this is part 2 of my radiator replacement saga on my 1967 Morgan Plus 4. This is the winter racing radiator replacement that I got off eBay, and the fan's been mounted, the Spal 12-inch fan, and it's been painted black, and I used the Rust-Oleum Ultra Semi-Gloss High Heat paint. And of course, this is the paint that you use for painting a grill that's been sitting outside for a few years, and you want to get it back to a good paint rather than rust. So this paint is a semi-gloss, which normally most people use a flat, but for this radiator I didn't really want a high gloss, but I did want a semi-gloss sheen, and this came out very well. I'm very pleased with how the paint job came out. Now this particular paint, if you use it, the directions say that you need to cook the item that's been painted at 400 degrees, because typically it's used for grills, and you can just light up your grill and it will cook. But what I did was the stainless steel brackets, the 4 that I made, I painted them black and put them in an old toaster oven that I had out in the garage, and the paint really cooks on really nice. Now, the wife wouldn't let me, of course, put this in my oven because it would really stink up the house with some noxious fumes. They're not, toxic fumes, but they are noxious fumes. So what I did was I took a couple of days, and a couple of times each day I would go out with my heat gun, and I would stand around and just heat this thing up really close on high heat with the heat gun, and it did a pretty good job of outgassing all the the paint solvents out of the paint. And like I said, came out well. And what are we going to do? We're going to stick it in the engine compartment and forget about it. So it's going to cook on its own over time. So anyway, just a little tip on that. I also up here replaced the Spal plug with another plug on Amazon. And the reason I did that, the wire gauge for the fan is 14 gauge, but they recommend using a 12 gauge run of line back to your relay because this is a high amperage and you don't want any voltage drop, so they recommend a 12 gauge. So I found this 14 to 12 gauge waterproof plug, and went ahead and got it, put it together, and it works well, and it's waterproof, looks good, does the job. So I rewired it, and I've already got the 12 gauge wire hooked up with the male side of the plug to go in there. All right, so let me flip this over. Oh, also, just an aside, we got the nylock nuts, 1/4 inch flathead, stainless steel attachment pieces there. Got that all on, and it's firmly mounted, 6 pounds, and it's not going anywhere. And it's not going to have any vibration. I can tell by how firmly that thing is mounted that there's not going to be any vibration. So that's a good solid setup for the fan. And that's like I said, 6 pound Spal fan, every bit of it. All right, let's flip it over. And I'm going to move it, turn it around here so that we can see some of the items here. Now, on this side, I elected, I left these shipping caps on. And, painted the painted it with the caps on because I wanted to have a good metal to rubber hose clamping area for the clamps. And before I go any further on that, I will give a warning. Keep in mind that the original radiators, I'm pretty sure they were a steel tank, bottom and top, on the radiator. These are all aluminum, and you got to remember, aluminum is soft. So, when you go, for instance, like threading in the temperature gauge, your threads in the radiator are going to be aluminum. You don't want to over torque anything because you could easily destroy the aluminum threads. Likewise, when you go to put radiator hoses and the clamps, if you get a little bit too firm on worm gear clamps, you could crush this aluminum and get it out around where you're going to have leaks, and that would be a problem. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put new hoses on the radiator to the engine, and I'm going to try the what they call the constant tension, the constant tension clamps. Those are the new clamps that are on most of your OEMs. Use those now on all new cars, and they're basically a spring clamp that you use a pair of pliers or a tool to open up the clamp, slide it over the hose, and put the hose on, and you got to squeeze the clamp to get it back on. But the constant tension is not you're not going to over tighten it. It'll be a constant tension even when the hose and the aluminum expand and contract after you're running the car and then you park it, or in cold weather over the winter. Sometimes you used to see drips coming out of the car on the bottom from the radiator, and you didn't know where it came from. You tighten up the clamps. Well, these constant tension clamps keep a constant tension on the rubber and to the the aluminum outlets, or what they have now are plastic, so that it contracts and it expands and contracts with the temperature of the radiator. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're dealing with these aluminum radiators. Just keep in mind you're dealing with some, although it's it's a high strength, aluminum's high strength. It's not like steel. It will give if it's if you're just a little too firm with torquing or clamping. Okay, so the next areas I left unpainted. I left the radiator cap area unpainted because if you paint it, it's just going to get marred up when you go to put the cap on. And also, of course, the overflow tube, I want to be able to clamp it well also. But the other things you want to, kind of leave unpainted. One is on the brackets on either side. I taped those off and left them unpainted because I want a good ground. Your radiator needs to be grounded. So I may even get, when you put the bars on, the cross support bars, and the nuts and the washers, you're going to want to have that metal to metal contact so you have a good ground. The other thing I may end up doing is putting a ground strap, one of those braided kind of ground straps, copper, and run it from this bottom bracket, one or the other, to a good place on the chassis or engine. that you can, be sure your radiator has a good ground. Also, for the temperature thermostatic switch, I let the cap on. Likewise, you want a good ground here on the rim when you go to install your thermostatic switch, so you have a good ground for it. Now, this is my thermostatic switch. Now, and it's going to screw into that hole. That is an M22 metric hole, and it's going to fit this brass bushing. This is M22. The actual thermostatic switch is a 3/8 inch tapered NPT. And also this is a crush washer. So this is straight thread, and this crush washer is going to act just like a, on your oil drain plug. Same thing. It's going to screw in without any problem here, I think. Oh, there we go. And screw that in. I'm going to wrench it down, and that'll be a good tight fit. And you can see the washer, aluminum washer, brass fitting. You're going to have good contact, ground contact, without any paint on there. Now, this is an NPT, and if you're familiar with plumbing, you have a lot of NPT tapered fittings, and they're meant to be, you're meant to use Teflon tape on this fitting because it is tapered, and you want a good fit. Now, on the forums, and I've talked to many Morgan, guys that have a lot of experience on Morgans and automotive, and they say don't use Teflon tape because you will lose the ground between your thermostatic switch and your radiator if you use Teflon tape. Now, I've read where there are people that say, well, that's not true. And I've read some plumbing forums and some other opposing views that say, hey, you can use Teflon tape because the threads are going to cut through and hit the threads on the inside of whatever you're screwing it into. The other people say, okay, don't use Teflon tape, but you can use this Teflon paste. And it's similar to Teflon tape, but it's a tape that's typically used on sealing, natural gas fittings. When you're going to put in a gas line, they want a good seal, and they use a product like this to seal it. Now, this is, watertight. So, and I've already done it with the temperature sending gauge here. And what I did to test it before and after, I took an ohm meter and with an ohm meter, hooked it up to ground, and touched it to the steel collar. .3. That's what it is. 0.3. And I did this without the Teflon paste and with the Teflon paste, and it came out 0.3. So good. It's a good ground with the Teflon paste. And now other people might say, well, hey, over time you're going to lose that connection with corrosion. Just like when I pulled this, sending gauge out, the Smiths, they said, oh, it has lots of corrosion where you're going to lose your metal to metal contact. Well, keep in mind that this is a steel to aluminum, and you get some unlike metal corrosion, and that's not good. But this paste seals it off, so you don't get the oxygen or moisture through into the threads, and that prevents corrosion. So yes, I'm kind of on the other side now of the argument. Use a Teflon paste so that you properly seal your threaded your threads on your temperature gauge, sending unit, and your temperature switch. I would highly recommend it. And like I said, I've tested it. Even over time, I don't think I think it's going to help, reduce corrosion between the metal and the aluminum. And I think it's, hey, I think it works. And I know I'll have a good seal there. The other thing is, when I pulled the temperature sending unit out of the original radiator, it was loaded with corrosion. In fact, it wasn't screwed all the way into the radiator. I could see like a 1/4 inch of thread still sticking out. And when I took that out, that steel collar that's on this Smith's brass temperature sending unit, it was pretty crusty. So I took a Dremel tool with a wire brush, went over it really well, got as much out as I could. And, I just came in after I, got the brackets, the fan mounted, everything's painted black, everything's just about ready to go. And I went to screw in that temperature sending unit, and I could only barely get one thread in. It wouldn't go any further. So, yeah, I was sweating. I was scared to death that maybe the Chinese didn't use the right tap to tap in the 5/8 inch by 18 UNF thread that this collar requires. And so I was really nervous. So what I ended up doing was going to Amazon once again and getting this. This is a 5/8 inch by 18 UNF die. And what I did was take the unit and put it in a vise on these flats here with it sticking up, put this on, and with some cutting fluid, little PB blaster, my favorite, and worked it all the way down, chased out the threads really well, came back in, tried again to put that in the hole, and sure enough, it went in really tight. Took my wrench, said a prayer, and got it all the way down. And hey, really a big relief. I mean, it was a firm fit, but didn't stretch the threads or cause any damage to those aluminum threads. It just went in really firm, really nice. So, hey, it's almost ready to go in now. I'm going to go ahead and, tighten this bushing down, crush the crush washer, go ahead and put some of that TPFE or TPF paste, Teflon paste on here. Screw it in. Be sure I check the the resistance reading on that. Be sure I got good ground, and it'll be time to put this thing in, because we're only a couple of months away from putting our cars back on the road. So I'm sure there's some people that'll have some comments and suggestions. I hope this might help other people who have similar situation. Keep in mind, this winter racing on eBay, they have several different radiators for different Morgan cars. And keep in mind, this one, mine, it just happened to have a pusher fan mounted on there, and I wanted a bigger pusher fan, and I wanted it thermostatically controlled because it has no other fan, mechanical fan on the motor. So I'm anxious to get this fitted in there. Hopefully won't have any leaks, and I'll be on my way for spring. So if you have any questions, comments, hey, leave them below. Thanks a lot.